You've gotten very heavily involved in the policy side of Bitcoin. It's a different culture around Bitcoin in the UK than it is in the US.
We can't even buy a Bitcoin spot ETF. That makes people wonder, doesn't it? Well, like, you're saying it's so great, but my financial advisor says don't buy it, and the BBC says that it's bad for the environment. So we have the highest energy bills in the world. We have green taxes, we have policy costs. The first thing that we need to do is get the Financial Conduct Authority to understand the difference between Bitcoin and crypto, because at the moment they treat all of them as restricted mass market investments, which means that they all have the same risk profile, which is ridiculous.
Welcome back to Hosting Bitcoin, the show where we explore the pioneers, principles, and paradigm shifts shaping the future of money and freedom. Today's guest is Susie Violet Ward. She's a Bitcoiner, the CEO and co-founder of Bitcoin Policy UK, a writer, and an advocate for truth, freedom, and education outside of the system. And whether she's writing, speaking, or guiding others on their journey, Susie's voice is a call to wake up and to live with purpose, clarity, and conviction. Today, we're diving into Bitcoin, education, sovereignty, and what it looks like to work to change established power structures all around us. Well, Susie, welcome to Hosting Bitcoin.
Thank you for having me.
It's so good to see you again. It's been several months since we met up in Vegas.
Yeah, Vegas was crazy, wasn't it? That was absolutely mad. I think it took me a week to recover from that conference.
So many people, so much going on. I'm right there with you. I needed a full week of not speaking to a single human soul right after that.
Yeah, no, but I really did love it though. I thought there was, you know what, interestingly, we were on a mining panel. I found that there were a lot more stalls there catering to mining. Did you notice that?
I thought the mining section was huge. I mean, it was by far the largest single block of the conference, which just speaks to how big it really is. I mean, it's a huge part of the whole movement is the mining side.
Absolutely. Well, we think it's the most important part.
So getting into this, I would love to hear, because I don't know, how did you originally find Bitcoin? How did it become a part of your life? How did you get into this whole movement yourself?
So it was gradual. There was no one moment. It was just a really, I think it popped into my psyche a couple of times, and I'd sent my husband some articles. In fact, I sent him quite a few articles and he ignored me every single time, and went back and did a search on Bitcoin and our messages and found them, took a screenshot recently and apologized because he did actually ignore me. I remember, I think I sent him about 3 or 4 articles and every single one he's just like, So I had it at the back of my mind. I hadn't really done anything with it. And what was interesting is at work, my boss took the mickey, or took the piss. I don't know what you say in America. What do you do when you take when you joke with someone, when you're taking the piss out of someone, what do you say?
When you're messing with them?
There you go. He was messing with someone who had just bought some Bitcoin. That's it. I didn't realise there'd be that language barrier.
It's all supposed to be English, but it's really not.
So he was messing with one of my colleagues and taking the mickey out of the fact that he had bought some Bitcoin. And I just thought, why is he doing that? Like, why is he so dismissive? And it was because he was so dismissive that I think I took notice. And then I think there were a couple of incidents along the same lines where they were very, very dismissive. And that made me pay more attention for some weird reason. And then I started wondering, what is crypto? How do you buy it? Do you buy it on a different, is it like a bank? There were so many questions that I had that I didn't know. So I got a hot wallet, just downloaded one, and thought I really would like to buy some Dogecoin and some XRP. So I bought some Bitcoin to buy some altcoins. I don't have them now. And I went through my shitcoining phase and came out at the other end, thank God. But my first purchase of Bitcoin was really to buy some Doge.
Wow. And when was this?
I would say it's really difficult to know because during the whole pandemic, the years blurred, and I honestly have no concept of time, but I'm going to say 2020, 2021.
So
Definitely to buy 2021.
how long after you had Dogecoin and XRP did it take you to get into full on making Bitcoin your mission?
So I did go through quite a hardcore shitcoining phase that really did probably last for a good year, and got wrecked, which is good. Learn both sides. I would go up to London to more Web3 events and Bitcoin events because they didn't really exist at that time. And so I really was quite immersed in it and learned a lot about it. And I think that's why I'm such a Bitcoin maxi now, is because I kind of felt how ridiculous the whole thing was, and how it was just built on sand, and it was all smoke and mirrors and pump and dump. And once you understand the concept that, and I know this isn't an anti-crypto pod, but once you understand the concept that these VC companies can print their own tokens and then sell them to then write articles to convince people to buy their shitty tokens and then dump on. Once you understand that cycle and how it works, you're like, oh my goodness, terrible. So I suppose, yeah, that was my rite of passage, and then I came out the other end. I think I was probably a full-on Bitcoiner by the time I started writing about CBDCs and Bitcoin. So I wrote an article early 2023, which was one of the first mainstream articles about Bitcoin in our paper in London called City AM. And it was what my first article was about CBDCs, and the second one was how Bitcoin could help save the environment. And so that was probably early January 23. But by that time, I just had this bubble in my tummy where I was just so excited by Bitcoin. The only thing I could do was write it down, otherwise, I was going to explode.
So you've gotten very heavily involved in the policy side of Bitcoin. And before that, I mean, were you hardcore freedom maximalist? Did Bitcoin like unlock that in you, or was it always something that you were very passionate about? And what were you doing before you were chairing Bitcoin Policy UK?
So I think I've always been a freedom fighter of some variety, but without putting a name to it. So my Twitter handle is Decentrasues, and that was something that my husband called me even before Bitcoin, because he was just like, I'm sure it was, or maybe round about the same time, but like it was before I was this into it, like he was just saying, you've always been your own kind of entity, like you've never really wanted to be told what to do. Like they couldn't, the school system didn't suit me in any way, shape, or form, because I just wasn't good at being told what to do. And so, yeah, I think it just naturally fitted me. So I think, like a lot of Bitcoiners, they were Bitcoiners before Bitcoin even existed, really.
And what in your background made you get into policy and writing? I know you've got a financial background before this, don't you?
So I started my working life, and I think that's what led me to Bitcoin as well. And that's why I think I do the writing, is because I started my life as an accountant, and then I went into IT, and then I became a financial analyst, and then a Cognos developer, which is just a Cognos is just a platform for a planning tool. But it helped me kind of understand systems and understand a little bit of code. So every single part of my job had led me to this point. And then I did the hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of Bitcoin research. And I think that that's why I feel able to write about it, because I wasn't a writer, because I had all the work experience, the finance, the IT, and then the Bitcoin experience. The problem is that journalists now, as excellent as they are at writing, don't have that background. They don't have any of the previous knowledge that you need to understand this unbelievably huge technology that is going to change the world. It covers, like, energy, human rights, geopolitics, economics. It's an endless list of aspects and subjects, and to get your head around the fact that this decentralized protocol can do all of those things, that kind of revelation doesn't happen overnight. And so therefore I think that it is a journey, And unfortunately, the mainstream media and the writers really don't appreciate quite how big the hill is that they have to climb to get there.
And how did policy come into the picture for you? Did you see that? Because that's not necessarily something that's in your work background, but clearly super important in the UK to focus on policy. How did that come into the picture for you?
Well, like all things, you fall into it. And I think I essentially fell into it. So what happened was I wrote the article, How Bitcoin Could Help Save the Environment. And my colleague and co-founder, Freddie, reached out to me because he read the article and said, we're starting up this policy organisation in the UK and we need somebody to head up the mining subcommittee. Would you be interested? And I didn't know what I was going to do in Bitcoin at that point because I had realized how draining my fiat job was, and
Mm.
I had to leave it. I couldn't do it anymore. It really was just zapping the life out of me, because once you see how broken the world is and the system, and you realize that everything that you're doing is essentially meaningless, and in exchange for fiat that they're debasing, and you understand that whole concept, it makes it really hard to go to work. And so I was really struggling at work, and I said to my husband, I've got to leave. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I need to make space for something to come into it. And at that point, I think I spent my whole working life always striving for something, if it's the next qualification or the next promotion or the next pay rise. And at that point, I was just like, I know I want to do something in Bitcoin. Um, but what that is, I just do not know. So I begged my boss for redundancy so he could pay me to leave, because I'd been there for quite a long time. So I had a little buffer to keep me going while I figured it out. And this was part of me making space. It was writing articles, doing things that I wanted to do, kind of following my intuition and going in no particularly planned direction, but just the direction that felt right at the time. And so obviously that led to Freddie reaching out to me, and it sounded like something that I would be interested in. And so the rest is history.
Hmm. And at what point did your tendencies into the Bitcoin space start bleeding into family life? And you
Yeah,
mentioned you had your own run-ins with the education system when you were
exactly.
growing up. So how did that start? Was that before, or was that just during your Bitcoin journey that really started to take hold?
Well, the run-ins were me personally when I was at school. Teachers did not like me. I was not suited to school. They didn't like people that questioned them, and so a lot of what they did didn't make sense to me. So when you're like, "Hey, can I ask a question?" They're just like, "Shut up, sit down." Like, they just got so fed up with me. But I don't homeschool. I can see why it would be a huge benefit, and I do have strong feelings about how poor our education system is. It's broken. It's utterly broken. In fact, I wrote something down the other day that I heard somebody say on a podcast, because I think that this described it so beautifully, and it's amazing that we're having this conversation. He said that we have designed a school system that strips away any meaning. We've designed a school system that is centered around kids memorizing meaningless content with contextless facts for tests that measure nothing of any value. I mean, they like nailed it. Like, that's exactly what it is. But the thing is when I send my kids to, he went on to say, you memorize this nonsense for this text that measures nothing, and it doesn't measure intelligence or creativity. And that's the thing. It really doesn't measure intelligence, and we're being stripped of our creativity. And I think that when you put kids into a square box and tell them to sit still for an hour and be quiet and listen to something that they don't really want to listen to, it's a big ask, isn't it? And so, but at the same time, I think it's really helpful to have both sides, because I quite like sending my kids into the state system, because then when they come home, I can kind of unwind the damage, and then they've seen it from both sides. And so I find it really super helpful. So, for example, I know, but luckily they're good. Well, one of them is better. The other one's just a mini me, and I do worry for him. But God, the other day I got a call from the teacher say, we've had to give Henry a detention. He was hiding in a cupboard. Okay. And then he said to me, and he said exactly that. All I wanted to do is sit down and be quiet. It's not a lot to ask. And I'm thinking, kind of is. So my daughter was in geography, and she was learning about solar and wind and renewable energy. And the teacher was demonizing nuclear. It was really interesting when she came back and told me everything that she had learned that
Hmm.
day. So I made her sit down and watch a TED talk from 5 years prior that basically undid absolutely everything that the teacher had said. And I was trying to explain how out of date the school system is and how you're just there to pass exams. You've just got to answer them in the way that they want it to be answered. You don't necessarily answer it with the correct answer. And so it gives them this excellent learning opportunity where you can show them that school is broken. And so they see it for what it is. And once they see through the cracks of that, they can then see through the cracks of everything else. So I actually think, as destructive as it is, that there is actually some benefit to sending them to a normal school.
Interesting. Knowing better, or knowing that it could be different, why did you make that choice, the conscious choice, to keep them in
To
a
send them to a normal school and not to homeschool them.
yeah?
Yeah, so well, for that reason, what the other reason is that I think that most of your learning happens when you leave school anyway. So I just, to be fair, think this is a period they've just got to get over. Like, I just think it's a tick box before their actual learning and life starts. I just don't see that this period really offers anything. It almost just stops them from moving on to what they want to do.
Hmm.
And I think also I don't know if I would have the time or the patience or the ability to work it all out. I mean, homeschooling during COVID absolutely killed me. And if I had to do anything like that again, I just don't know if I would survive it. So there's a selfish aspect. I can't deal with homeschooling two kids, and I just don't have the patience. Um, but I don't think it's a bad thing sending them there. I think that the social aspect is quite good, and they really do get a chance to see how broken the world is.
In the off hours when they're with you, what do you spend time teaching them about or exposing them to that you know that they're not getting there?
So we talk about how to read between the lines on the news. So when
Hmm.
something comes up on the TV, well, not that we have the news on a lot, but say if it does, or there's something, we can discuss. Well, what do you think's going on there? And so I always teach them to try and see through the narrative, and they're getting quite good at that actually. And we have some really good discussions around that. Obviously, teaching them about money, and of course, Bitcoin. My son gave a talk to his class when he was 10. And my daughter is doing exams at the moment, and one of her speeches was written on Bitcoin. So we do learn about that at home, and they do absorb that information. Thank goodness. I mean, they ignore lots of it, but they do take in something.
If they're anything like me when I was a kid, I think my greatest skill was ignoring my parents and actively rebelling against anything that they wanted to teach me.
I know. Well, that's the thing. It's like, it's really tricky because I know that my daughter loves the fact that it is rebellious and it is anti-establishment, but at the same time, it's coming from me, so it must be a real kind of like. Don't. But
how
they
do
do
you
listen. They're taking it on board.
how do you think Bitcoin comes up at all in their traditional schooling?
Not in the actual teaching or the classes, no. But I know that whenever it gets mentioned at school, especially my older daughter, if she ever mentions it or what I do, then all of her school friends instantly ridicule it.
Interesting. And that's
Mm,
maybe, I mean, I haven't been in the school system for a while here, but it's a different culture around Bitcoin in the UK than it is in the US. I mean, we've got an
yeah.
openly supporting president, administration. You've told me it's a very different sense being a Bitcoiner in the UK. How is it different?
I don't think there are as many of us, perhaps. We are not embracing of it at all. our FCA, our Financial Conduct Authority, don't know the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. And then that muddies the waters quite significantly, especially when you're trying to explain it. We can't even buy a Bitcoin spot ETF in our pensions or our any kind of investment vehicle. Retail can't. So when you've got financial advisors who can't even advise people to buy the best performing asset of the decade, that that makes people wonder, doesn't it? Well, why you're saying it's so great, but my financial advisor says don't buy it, and the BBC says that it's bad for the environment. So what are you going to do? I mean, we don't really have much positive. I mean, there's been a few positive articles recently, which has been really surprising. I mean, it's not turning around too quickly, but I think there are some seeds.
So what do you think are the biggest hurdles to it getting more traction? I mean, that's crazy to me that people can't get the ETF, especially in one of the financial hubs in the world.
Yeah.
What
And the birth of computer and the computer science and one of the financial were the two things that we're good at, and we don't even get Bitcoin.
what are you doing through Bitcoin Policy UK to address the barriers to people actually being able to use this in the way that it's meant to be used?
So we're a think tank that advocate for people who want to buy, hold, and mine Bitcoin. So they're the things ultimately that we're advocating for. The first thing that we need to do is get the Financial Conduct Authority to understand the difference between Bitcoin and crypto, because at the moment they treat all of them as restricted mass market investments, which means that they all have the same risk profile, which is ridiculous. That you would have a meme coin that you created in your podcast studio on a website in 29 seconds, is exactly the same as a decentralized protocol that takes up, a 60% dominance of the whole crypto market. It just doesn't make sense. So they really do have to understand that first and foremost. We have to make sure that retail have access to a Bitcoin spot ETF, because the week that BlackRock or the US approved their first Bitcoin ETF, it was the second week, I think it was in January 2024. That same week, we had legislation that came in that made it harder for us to buy Bitcoin. They made it harder for the on-off ramps, put in a 24-hour cooling period, put in crazy questionnaires that even that no one knew the right answers to, that even when you knew that they were right, they were still coming up with wrong. So the people that were actually writing the questionnaires didn't even know what the answers were. And then you'd get locked out of, I know people that got locked out of Stripe because they couldn't complete these faulty questionnaires. So that happened the same week that the US approved a Bitcoin spot ETF. And then in 2024, Bitcoin went up by 100%. So the FCA's mandate is to protect customers and create growth, and all it did was protect everybody from the best performing asset of the decade. It's just insanity, and it's really difficult to know where the incompetence starts. And the malice, what is on that is it complete incompetence? Do they know what they're doing? What's going on?
Why do you think it's cultural? Do you think it's purely to do with who's in power? Why is there such a resistance to this?
So I do think who's in power does play a big part, because when we were sending open letters to the Conservative Party, the responses that we were getting, it felt like they were starting to be more open. And I think had the Conservative Party carried on and got into power instead of Labour, I think we would have made a lot more progress. However, Labour, it feels like it's rolled backwards, and they're just, I think their whole ethos, well, it's socialism, I guess, so that's inherently centralized. Explaining to them why a decentralized protocol's a good idea for innovation might not be something that they can quite get their heads around, because they just want control. I guess it goes against that narrative. But then at the same time, I'm thinking, am I giving them too much credit? Because that requires them to understand what they're rejecting. And I don't even think they're there yet. So I'm not, I don't know, it's tricky.
And they seem like they're naturally going to be opposed to it. And yet you have a platform there coming up,
We
don't you?
do. We do. We've managed to get a stand at the Labour Party conference in the main hall. So we're going to have a 4x4 stand and we are going to make an absolute splash and make sure that everybody sees, even if it's just a touch point where they just see the word Bitcoin, it'll be good enough. And we're actually reaching out to all the MPs shortly. We're going to be writing to all the MPs, or I will personally be writing to every single Labour MP to tell them that we're there. So that's going to be so they and send them our Bitcoin manifesto along with that email, so they can't say that they haven't been informed.
That's amazing. What do you think is the way in? I mean, what is the tipping point for these people to understand how much it matters for them? Because I know in the US we've got plenty of people who say this doesn't actually solve anybody's problem because we have the exorbitant privilege of having a pretty, at least comparatively well-run financial system, a pretty strong currency. I mean, what do you think is the way in the UK?
It's tricky. I mean, the obvious one, we have the highest energy bills in the world, and we spend £1 billion a year on curtailment costs on wind farms. That feels like a really quick win. I mean, demand response and flexible load, absolutely. If we can find a way of supporting our renewables that are being built out very, very quickly, I mean, those curtailment costs are only going to grow. So, implementing Bitcoin mining, save those costs, get another revenue stream, and balance the grid. It's an absolute no-brainer. I mean, we have written a paper on this that we have sent to the future energy scenario at the National Grid, and that we send to MPs when they talk about these things. And they are talking about the issues that we're having with renewables, and it is a very, very obvious fix. And I'm just really hoping that somebody will see and pick up on it from that angle.
Have you ever felt like you've done everything right, built the business, made smart investments, and yet there's still one piece missing? If you're someone who believes in Bitcoin but hasn't yet explored mining, let me introduce you to something that most people never even realize exists, and that is fully managed Bitcoin mining with Abundant Mines. We help high net worth individuals like you own industrial grade mining infrastructure without ever touching the machines. It's hands-free, professionally hosted, and designed to generate passive income by turning electricity into Bitcoin every single day. It's tax advantaged, it's asset backed, and for many of our clients, it's become one of the smartest moves that they've ever made in their investing career. So if you're ready to take the next step into real Bitcoin ownership, not just holding, but producing it at a discount, visit abundantminds.com. That's abundantminds.com and see why this strategy is changing the game for serious investors. So you mentioned it's the most expensive energy. Is it because there isn't enough generation, or what is the issue? Why is it so expensive?
It's a really good question. Sometimes I even wonder if they know. So there are, costs that get added on. We have green taxes, we have policy costs, we have there's lots of different layers to how our energy is priced, and I don't think all of it is necessary. And then on top of that, you've obviously got these huge curtailment costs and network costs, and if you've got an inefficient system that isn't really working, that's got bad incentives, i.e. the government are paying wind farms to switch off producing, it's not very cohesive, and it's not going to lead to cheap prices, is it?
So I'm sorry, the government is paying wind farms to turn off. Can you explain that a little? Most people who don't understand how energy markets work are going to say, how does that make any sense? Why are they doing that?
So when you build out renewables, you want to build things out for max capacity. So when everybody's using it and you need the most energy, that's how you build it out. But the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, and it's intermittent and it goes up and down. And sometimes if there's not a lot of electricity being used, but the wind is blowing really, really strong and a lot of electricity is being generated, the grid can't cope with that and it overwhelms the grid. So the way that they solve that is they shut down, say, some of the turbines and stop them from producing electricity. But that wind farm is then no longer receiving the money for that. So then, therefore, they have to be compensated. And that is curtailment.
So I, as a taxpayer somewhere in the middle of London, am paying for a wind farm somewhere out in the countryside to actually stop making energy so that my electric
Well,
bill can
not a
be higher.
taxpayer, an energy bill payer. So your electricity costs. Yeah.
So part of my actual electric bill is paying for energy not to be made.
That's exactly right. Yes.
I just want to let that one sit for a second. Because that's
It's
insane.
madness. It's
Doesn't make
madness.
any sense to me.
And we have the most perfect solution. And it's not just a perfect solution, it's the way that the world is going to go. It's a borderless neutral cash that is probably going to be the unofficial reserve currency of the planet. You've got the US who are having Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. That's not a small thing. You would think that you would want to get on board with it just a little bit. And then when you've got such an obvious solution as this, and these are the barriers that we're facing. Like, how do you bridge that education gap? How do you make people understand how vast the opportunities are when they've just been sold this constant bombardment of it's a Ponzi scheme, it's for criminals, and it's boiling the oceans?
So what's the real barrier? Is it purely education and bureaucracy? I mean, it doesn't seem like there's an engineering problem to solve here, unless I'm mistaken.
No, because there are good examples of it working in ERCOT and Texas and around the world. I mean, we see it working. It's not hypothetical. Regulation is definitely a barrier, a lack of understanding, um, and bad incentives. It's the same old shit, isn't it? Really.
Is there a way, I mean, if I were, say, a wind producer, would I be able to make more money having mining integrated than getting the curtailment
I'm not
incentives?
sure. I probably that would be really hard to answer that because I don't know how much they're curtailing, and I don't know the costs that they're actually getting paid, and I don't know what they would charge per unit. So I think there'd definitely be some calculations. But even if they're not getting more, you know, we shouldn't be paying them to switch off, regardless. Even if they got less, we should not be paying them to not produce. That's ridiculous.
How do you see this, or do you already see this being successful in the UK? I mean, I've never, it hasn't been super high on my list to set up a site in anywhere in the UK. But are there miners currently working there? I mean, is there mining opportunity there for people who are looking to set up?
There have been. I mean, I saw one brilliant miner that was mining off pig slurry and maize. So it was on a farm, and I actually went and saw it. It's not just oh, this could happen. Like, they were doing it because this farm was producing electricity from pig slurry and maize, and the farm was using the electricity, sending it back to the grid, and they still had an excess, and so they were actually feeding that into the Bitcoin miner and mining electricity. Unfortunately, I think, I don't know, the power agreements were maybe a little bit too expensive. I think it was perhaps too niche. I'm not 100% certain exactly what the issues were, but it just made more financial sense for them to pivot to AI, unfortunately. But
Hmm.
we do have another company that's working with wind farms in Scotland. Lots of opportunities. We have some proof of concepts that we're working on to show MPs what can happen. Um, with stranded energy. So, for example, we have a lot of commercial properties in the UK that have lots and lots of solar panels, and they don't use the solar at certain times of the day, and especially not at the weekends. So we've actually taken an S19 down to one of these places just to show them that they can actually mine Bitcoin off that excess as a little proof of concept. Well, once you've done it once and you can show them what's possible, you can roll that out across the country really, really easily, and it actually improves their energy efficiency certificates. We have things called EPCs where you have to prove how efficient your building is. I can see a time that at some point, if you're not mining Bitcoin, if you're stranded energy, then that's actually going to go against you. But, these things take time. There's a massive education gap, but we've just got to create proof of concepts and show them what's possible.
So where, if you, there's no shortage of places where you can focus, where there's an opportunity to educate people, but we all have limited time, limited bandwidth. Where are you diverting most of your resources to try and move the needle?
So at the moment, the big project we're focusing on is the Labour Party conference. So before that, we were developing an app where you could contact your MP and you could literally 1 or 2 clicks, you put in your postcode, it tells you your local MP, and you can send an email to your MP. And we did these templates where you could, I'm just trying to get out the thing, how, yeah, take action and write to your MP about Bitcoin. So there were 4 letters that you could choose from depending on what subject most resonated with you, and you could send it to all of them. But there was opposing CBDCs, Bitcoin tax treatment, because companies are leaving the UK because of the tax system here, and they don't seem to, our MPs don't seem to understand that you can't just keep taxing people. There is a limit, and that we live in you know a digital economy where a lot of people can just up and move, and I don't really think they've even quite understood that yet. That it's not like back in the day pre-COVID where people were chained to their desks. Now people have options. We can work remotely. The FCA classification of Bitcoin, that absolutely has to change, and just discussion around a UK strategic Bitcoin reserve. So these are the 4 subjects that we want people to hope, or that other people want to raise awareness on. And you can go to the app, find your MP, and send them a letter, just a few clicks, on any of those subjects.
And we'll have the link to that app in the show notes as well, so that anybody who is in the UK can actually participate. Just go straight to the link. You'll be able to download it, see how it all works, and that, I mean, we've seen a lot of change happen just from people engaging. Right, the members of constituencies reaching out to their representatives has occasioned a lot of change, and at minimum, the impetus for them to educate themselves. I mean, if they don't hear anything from anybody who's in their voter base, they have no reason to do any research. If you suddenly get hundreds of emails about the same thing, that's a very different position to be in. It encourages them to take action.
Yes, touch points. So you think that if people contact their MPs on any of those subjects, or all 4 of them, if they want to, and then we have a presence at the Labour Party conference. A few months ago, I emailed all 650 MPs our Bitcoin manifesto. As I said, I'm going to be emailing the Labour MPs with the Bitcoin manifesto again, and telling them that we're going to be at their conference. Would they like to come and speak to us? All of these touch points, they're very small, they're very minor, but unless you actually make yourself heard, that nothing will change. People do have to start lobbying effectively.
And I saw, related but unrelated, I mean, one of our biggest barriers is getting the main distribution channels of information to publish the right information, to actually have some journalistic integrity about what this industry is. And I know you've had a long running interaction with the BBC, which growing up, I mean, I thought the BBC was untouchable. I thought that was a very unbiased place to get information. But can you walk me through
We
this
all did.
story?
We all believed it.
Can you take me through what it's been like interacting with the BBC around their stance on Bitcoin and where they're getting their information, and just how that's all unfolded.
Right. Okay. So, there's an absolutely fantastic website called Bitcoin Perception. And I don't know if you've come across it, but it analyzes Bitcoin coverage across all the mainstream media outlets. So Daily Mail, Telegraph, Financial Times, BBC, etc. And so you can see that when that coverage is analyzed, that most of it is negative. There's a little bit of balance and hardly any positive. Well, we know that there's a huge amount of amazing stuff that you can write about with Bitcoin. So the fact that they've only found a little slither of positive, either they've got an agenda or they don't understand it. So there was an article, every Bitcoin payment uses a swimming pool's worth of water. And I couldn't believe it. When you just read, you're just like, oh, right, here we go. So I thought, I'm going to actually just pick this one article out of all the others that have been written. I'll pick this one article and I'll see how easy it is to get a retraction. So the first thing that I did was I wrote and asked the BBC Freedom of Information Request Department how they fact checked it. Because you could tell that if they'd fact checked it, they wouldn't have written it. And they wrote back to me and said that we don't have to give you this information because the BBC is protected under journalism and art. So the BBC, if you ask them any journalistic question at all, legally do not have to answer you, which is insane. When I realised that, when I got the letter through, I was just like, what? No. But really, honestly, because of the way that it's funded, bizarrely. So if it was Sky, they would have had to have given me the information because I think it's funded by advertising. But because this is funded by license fee payers, it changes the rules somehow. Like I didn't get it. So I tried to find how to actually log a formal complaint, and I did loads of things just on their website that just seemed to disappear into the internet. I didn't get a reference number, nothing. It was almost impossible to find out how to log a complaint about this. I was emailing the journalist who wrote the piece, the crypto correspondent, and their press office. Nothing. Just nothing. And I kept trying, and eventually their press office came back and went, "Oh, you could just fill it out using this link." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'll do that then. It was just like, how was I not able to find this 6 months ago? I mean, it took me 6 months to find the link that I needed just to raise the right complaint process. I mean, that's bonkers. So I filled in the form, but there was a character limit, so you've got to be really kind of like careful with how you write it. But considering how complicated this subject is, it's not really something that you can fit into a few characters. And they responded. I know it's crazy. They responded to me, but the response that they gave me didn't really marry up with the issue that I'd sent. They just sent back their own words. Didn't really address anything that I'd written about. So then I contacted the Digital Asset Research Institute and asked them to help me write a formal scientific rebuttal to the article to prove that it wasn't just my opinion. There were these experts that could write, and tell you why everything that you had written in that article was factually incorrect. Thing is, because there was a character limit on the form, I couldn't send the rebuttal. They made me post it. I had to post the complaint to the BBC because their systems couldn't cope with a 16-page document. And then when they replied to that, once again, the response was not representative of what was sent at all. So it got to the stage where it was just getting a little bit silly, and they were like, "Look, we can't help you anymore. Like, we're not going to retract it, and we don't accept what you've written." And some of the other points that I was raising that they didn't actually address was that the source of the document was Alex de Vries, a Dutch central banker, who had been discredited in 2018. So just that alone was enough to discredit this entire article, let alone all the other evidence that I had provided. It was clear. It was really, really clear. When they refused to do it, they then sent me to stage 2 complaints. Well, that's a whole new process, isn't it? Can you imagine the time that this is taking? And every single time they tell me to do something, like, it leads to a dead end as well. You know, they told me to contact Ofcom, the Independent Commissioner's Office. You know, the Freedom of Information didn't lead to anything. You know, there are all these different departments, and you're like, I'm going to do every single thing that you tell me to because I'm going to leave no stone unturned. But it was exhausting. So I went to stage 2 complaints, laid out every single point that they had not addressed. And then they came back and said, no, sorry, we can't help you. That's it. This is the end. You've got nowhere to go. That was it. 13
Wow.
months.
In the face of that, where most people are getting information from sources like that, what can we do?
That's a really good question, because you can't challenge it. It doesn't do anything. It zaps your time. I would just say the most sensible thing is just not to engage and to ignore it, because it's not real, is it? It's just made up information, which is exactly what this was. And I absolutely know there is no way they could have fact checked it. You know, the amount of things that I proved that were wrong with that, with the article, with the institution, with the way they handled it, with the journalists, every part of that process was broken, and they took no accountability whatsoever and didn't even remotely acknowledge it.
Wow. That's insane. All the more important that we have something like Bitcoin that gives you that freedom to express, that can't be stopped, that can't be censored in that way, and has essentially this quality of truth that can't be corrupted about it, in a world where, unfortunately, power structures like to make up their own story.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And what is reality? I mean, it does make you question everything, doesn't it? What's real? What have I been told that's a lie? What did I previously believe that isn't actually true? And then everything that you see, you're constantly questioning it. And it can be exhausting, because you don't really want to walk through life like that, do you? Distrusting of absolutely everything around you, your governments, the institutions, the people that are there that are supposed to help you. You know, it's a shame. I know that's an understatement, isn't it? But it really is a shame.
So if all of this were to work out beautifully, what do you think an ideal vision of the UK's position, stance, adoption of Bitcoin would look like? Let's say everything goes well, the tides turn. What does the UK look like in 5 or 10 years?
I would love the obvious one is the FCA has to distinguish between Bitcoin and crypto, obviously, and retail have to have access to a Bitcoin spot ETF. That aside, I think that the best thing that we can do is integrate Bitcoin mining into absolutely every aspect of our lives. Heating, anything that uses heat, you know, energy grids, um, growing food, heating greenhouses, just absolutely everything. Because I think that hash rate is going to be very important in the future. And at the moment, the US have 40% of the hash rate, and that's a lot. And I don't really think that that's good. So it's one of the centralization risks that I think people need to be aware of. And in the UK, we have something really crazy small amount, like 0.1, 0.23%. Like, I think it's so small you can't even measure it, to be fair. You know, and I think that we need to really up our game when it comes to hash rate. And, you know, the penny will drop eventually. Decentralization is important. This has really good use cases. It makes business sense. And we need more hash power, more hash rate, sorry, in the US. We need, it's the end of the day. It's the beginning of the day for you. It's the end of the day for me. We need more hash rate in the UK. You've got it all. You've got like loads. I'm like, crikey, like 40%. And the thing is, you know, they actually, OFAC transactions, Marathon actually proved that you can censor OFAC transactions. You know, if the US get to over 50% of the hash rate, you know, what kind of repercussions will that have? in terms of censorship as well.
And for you personally, what do you want your impact to be on this movement? If you were to look back and say, I was successful, what would that look like?
Do you know, success would be a country that I want to live in, not that I want to move away from. Because like a lot of people do think that the policy work is ridiculous because Bitcoin is permissionless, and absolutely, it really is. You don't have to ask for permission, not at all. Bitcoin will do its thing, absolutely. It's not my issue though. The issue is that I want to stay living in this country. My kids are here. You know, I quite like it here. I can't think of anywhere else that I would move to, and I don't really want to be forced out just because we've got an economy that's going down the drain and a government that is overly controlling, leading, some might say, in got some authoritarian vibes when you look into the what they're doing with the Online Safety Act. I think success looks like the UK being a country that I would be happy to live in.
It's nice to not have to leave your home.
Yeah, I mean, the things I wouldn't have a problem like if I knew where to go, but I don't really know where I would go. Everywhere has pros and cons, really. I
Yeah.
mean, like for example, here the weather's shit. Like it just is. But at the same time, I love living just outside of London and so close to Europe. And I don't know where I'd move to if I was to move to another country, and I don't think that that should even be the conversation. It should just be a case of, can we just make this place work, please?
Yeah, absolutely. It's far better if you can be where you are and make it a better place, not just for you, but for everybody else who you care about, who lives there as well, who wouldn't even consider moving.
Exactly. No, and a lot of those people that I do care about, that I would also be doing it for, think that what I do is a joke. I can't even talk about it at family dues. Honestly, it's
Well,
that taboo.
I don't think it's a joke. And anybody listening who doesn't think it's a joke, where can people keep up with what you're working on personally, as well as through Bitcoin Policy UK? How can they get involved? We already mentioned the app, which will be linked in the show notes, but how can people keep up with you?
So yes, you can look up Bitcoin Policy UK on Twitter. We post everything that we're up to on there. Or if you want to have a look at some of the things that I'm writing or ranting about, you can just look at Decentrasuze on X as well. But honestly, anyone who is listening who's in the UK, please go to that app and fill it out and contact your MP. And I would also say that if you're not in the UK, have a look at what we've done and just see if there's something that you can do to replicate it. Because we do need all these touch points, and we do need to start letting MPs and politicians know that this is important to us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Susie. It's great to see you again. I can't wait to see you again in person.
Yes, Vegas next year. Vegas, baby.
Until next time, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.